Now, this is the first book I've read from a Protestant evangelical Mennonite on contemplative and historically traditional prayer. It's called Day by Day These Things We Pray. Now, Arthur Burrs is my guest. Is it more correctly Dr. Arthur Burrs? Professor Arthur Burrs?
They all work, but Arthur's good.
Your Honor, Arthur Burrs. Burrs means farmer?
That's right. It's a Dutch name. I'm the son of Dutch immigrants, and Dutch was my first language.
Well, there you go. There you go. But this is a fascinating book. But let's start with something everybody will be intrigued with. What is an oblate, let alone a Benedictine oblate, and which you have been for 30 years? Oh,
I'm an oblate at a monastery that I've been going to for 30 years.
That you've been going,
but over 30 years.
What's that all about?
An oblate is a person who makes a commitment to a local monastery to live prayerfully and live in service to the reign of God, and to be by being accountable to the local monastery. So as I say, I have a lot of history with this monastery. I've been going there for over 30 years. I know them and they know me, and so I talk to them about my prayer life, my ministry, my family life, and they hold me accountable to be more faithful as a Christian.
This is a Roman Catholic monastery?
It's an Anglican monastery.
An Anglican monastery.
Right.
And is it in the Toronto area?
It's in Michigan.
In Michigan?
Yeah.
So you don't get there a lot?
At this point, a couple times a year.
A couple times a year?
Right, for a few days. I was just there a few weeks ago.
Now, you and I talked a few years ago after you had done the Camino in Spain, which was a fascinating interview, and I'm hearing reports of people who got your book and have followed your example.
Wow.
My own daughter and son-in-law with their 3 little children, if you can believe that, did that last summer, and it was an amazing trip, and as it turned out, the last real family experience they had before his untimely death a few months ago. But why this interest? I mean, whatever motivated you to attach yourself to a monastery, and secondly, to begin to investigate what you call offices, referring to prescribed times of prayer?
Well, it's a long story, of course, but ever since I was a little child, I had a real active sense of God's presence and activity in my life. And I was prayerful as a child, and I found it really easy to pray as a child. And then when I went to university, my sister died, and she was my only sibling, and it really hit me hard. It raised a lot of questions, a lot of difficult questions. And all of a sudden, I found it very, very difficult to pray. Because the words used to come, the sentiments used to come quite easily, but I was so angry and I was so hurt, and sometimes I wasn't sure what I could say to God, and so it raised real difficulties for me. And at the same time, one day I saw a book in the bookstore in the remainder bin, and I'm kind of cheap and I like to buy remainder books, and it was by a Catholic theologian that I'd heard of, and I knew enough about him that I thought I disagreed with him, and I wanted to read the book to rebut his ideas. And so I bought the book for $1, and I brought it home and I read it, and indeed I didn't agree with everything that this particular theologian was saying. But one of the things that really struck me, Jim, was as I read the book and he talked about his devotional life and about his prayer life, I was stunned because I realized that this man had a discipline of praying with the Bible, with large passages of the Bible every day, several times a day. And here I had been sort of dismissive of him, and I thought, I have a lot to learn from him, especially when I thought about my own struggles with prayer, or all my friends in small groups and at church. A lot of us struggled with maintaining a disciplined prayer life, a regular kind of prayer life. And I realized that there were other traditions in the church that had a lot to teach me.
Yeah. You discovered the genius of the prayer book.
Yeah.
Did you use an Anglican prayer book? I guess you would.
For a number of years, I used a prayer book from Taizé, actually.
From Taizé.
The ecumenical community in France. Right.
Huh. Now, you actually got to the point, well, we'll get to that point in a minute.
Okay.
I'm looking at a quote that you included here from, is it Eugene Peterson?
Could be.
The Hebrew evening-morning sequence conditions us to the rhythms of grace.
Right.
We go to sleep, and God begins God's work. As we sleep, God develops God's covenant. We wake, are called out to participate in God's creative action. We respond in faith, in work, but always grace is previous. Grace is primary. We wake into a world we didn't make, into a salvation we didn't earn. Evening, God begins without our help, God's creative day. Morning, God calls us to enjoy and share and develop the work that God initiated. Creation and covenant are sheer grace, and there to greet us every morning. Now that really struck me because living in Israel, as we did for 7 years,
Right.
You know, Sabbath begins on Friday night at sundown.
Yes.
And that's the beginning of the day, interestingly, in the Hebrew Bible and also in the Hebrew concept. And on Friday afternoon, about 2 o'clock, I had an office right downtown, just across from the Prime Minister's office, and a lot of activity there. But it was like the whole city would go,
Right.
It's just like they just let all the stress go, all the pressure go. You'd see the traffic begin to thin out. Eventually, no traffic at all. People walking, often with flowers and prayer books and prayer shawls. And you know that every Friday night, every Jewish family is going to be together, and they're going to be having what's called Kabbalat Shabbat, welcoming the Sabbath. And the Sabbath day was truly a restful day. That's what struck me when I read Eugene Peterson's quote here from your book. But it comes in the 5th chapter when you talk about day by day these things we pray. You present there a theology of morning and evening prayer, and you continue on that theme one way or another almost through the whole book. Why morning and evening? Why is that so important?
Well, there are a couple things that I'd like to say, and one is that one of the reasons that I think this way of praying is important is because we, in our culture, and this is true for us Christians as well, we are losing a sense of rhythm and pace. We're losing a sense of the things that are important. We all feel distracted and busy and overwhelmed. I'm glad to hear that later in the morning in the program you're going to talk about the family table, eating together, playing games together. I think that's all part of that larger picture. And in many ways, our sense of time has been flattened and distorted. And it's my conviction that if we can regain the biblical sense of paying attention, special attention to God at least twice a day, in the morning and the evening, that will help us reorient the rest of our day as well. For me, it's like paying a tithe to God. When we give our tithe to God, when we give some of our money to God regularly, we're not saying, God, here's your portion and now I can do what I want with all the rest. No, when we give some of our money to God, we're really making a commitment that everything belongs to God, and that's a reminder that the way that we use all our money ought to be to the glory of God.
Right.
And I see the same thing about dedicating time in the morning and the evening. It's a way of dedicating some time to remind us that all time is held by God, and that rhythm then helps us to live in a way that's faithful to God.
Now, I can understand why we all can have a problem with the discipline of prayer.
Right.
If, in fact, our view of prayer is a shopping list.
Right.
You know, we go to God with requests.
Yes.
You make the point, and I couldn't agree more, that prayer is as much about listening as it is about anything else.
Yes.
But you also include two other elements. One is praise.
Yes.
And the third one is, what is the third one?
Do you want to know?
Yeah.
It's threefold.
Yeah.
Praising God, listening to God through
right.
the scriptures and through silence, and responding
Responding,
to God.
responding. And that responding is more than a verbal response necessarily. It can be a response in terms of action or a change in priority or of values or relational healing, whatever, right?
Yes, that's exactly right.
Yeah.